everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Kyla Hannington, the Public Outreach and Engagement Division Manager with the Prince George's County Office of Human Rights. And it is my pleasure to join with the Prince George's County Memorial Library System in bringing you another in our partnership series with NewSouth Books, a great partnership that has allowed us to virtually bring a whole slew of incredible writers and thinkers to the area. Tonight, we are thrilled to be joined by Ben Beard in conversation about his fantastic study of film, identity, culture, and place. The South Never Plays Itself. Ben Beard is a writer and librarian. He is the co-author of This Day in Civil Rights History, the author of Muhammad Ali, the Greatest, and King Midas in Reverse, and the author of the forthcoming biography of filmmaker Joseph H. Lewis, I Told You I Was No Good. In the 2000s, Beard reviewed movies and wrote features for Insight Magazine, King Kudzu, and FilmMonthly.com, where he also worked as an editor. Beard, a native of Georgia who spent his formative years in the Florida Panhandle and Alabama, currently lives in Chicago. And tonight we welcome back Anya, who appeared with film students from Hollins and Howard Universities last year as part of our Voting, Democracy, and Action series highlighting the sounds of voter suppression. She will be co-hosting tonight's conversation with me. She's an assistant manager with a local independent art theater and recently graduated from Hollins University in Roanoke, Virginia, with a degree in film studies. She has worked with the BBC, White Coat Productions, and Brickyard VFX, among others, and is mid-project on an upcoming feature-length documentary by director Amy Gerber-Stroh and Flatcoat Films called Hope of Escape. So welcome to you both.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So I would really, Ben, I love the book, and I was hoping you could talk to us a little bit about the book, introduce it for our audience.
Sure. I was going to read a little bit of it from the beginning in just a second, but I'll say I was writing novel manuscripts for about 15 years, and I had stopped submitting them anywhere, and I was writing them very seriously and getting better, but I was kind of going crazy. No one was even reading them, and I felt like I had to try something else, so I decided to try nonfiction, and that was, and this book was my first shot at it. I was just going to read a little bit from the beginning. I don't normally do this. Normally I just talk about it. I'm going to try something new. I'm going to read just for like 5 or 6 minutes, and then I will get going. All right, here we go. I grew up in the South, but I was raised on movies. My dad took my older sister Ann and me out to the movies every weekend. At home, we watched old westerns, film noir, gangster movies, The Twilight Zone, and the occasional drama on our one TV. One of my earliest memories of Gary Cooper, cold-eyed, lean, and lanky, staring out with his existentially heavy glare. Another is a chubby Michael J. Fox being stabbed in a dilapidated high school. A third is a Yugoslavian donkey kicking field goals for a professional football team. The summer I was 13, Ann and I watched almost every Hitchcock movie. Necrophilia, murder, voyeurism, and dismemberment. We were in hog heaven. Our friends thought we were nuts, but we felt liberated by our season of Hitchcock. Her favorite is North by Northwest because she loves Cary Grant. I prefer Vertigo and Rear Window because maybe I love Jimmy Stewart. Hitchcock's sense of suspense inherent in the banal details of everyday life is inextricably connected to my own brand of quotidian paranoia. Hitchcock helped me grow up. He shaped my skewed view of the world. As a kid, I loved The Last Starfighter, Star Wars, The Never-Ending Story, Beastmaster, Halloween 3, and Night of the Creeps. In 9th grade, my favorite movies were Lethal Weapon, RoboCop, and The Time Machine. I had no special affinity for movies set in the South. I didn't care for rural movies, save for Stand By Me, and I wasn't a snob until later. I tried making a few movies myself. My buddy Jeff had a VHS camera, and our friend Robert had charisma in spades. We made horror and science fiction movies. We wanted them to be good, but they were terrible. They had titles like Escape into the Cyborg Castle of Death and Cyborg Cowboy. We were 14 and excited about the world. It was like the movie Super 8, minus the talent, the drama, and the giant alien. For us, it wasn't the beginning of distinguished movie careers, or any movie careers. If we had grown up near Los Angeles, we might have had a chance in the industry. Robert had all the talent of a Jim Carrey or a Jack Lemmon. He was innately funny, interesting, mesmerizing, confident in his contorted body, and unpredictable. in life and on camera. Everyone loved him. He became a Bell South phone technician. Jeff was smart, savvy, strong, driven. He went on to serve as a Navy SEAL and is now a firefighter. I was me, a writer masquerading as something else, always breaking character, always bursting into laughter. This book, in part, is the journey of that 14-year-old kid, a bad actor who wanted to live in the movies but didn't know how and would never learn. I'm going to skip ahead. When I was a teenager, I cut my teeth on a spate of 1980s slasher urban Avenger films. Cities were portrayed as vile, squalid, and violent places. New York City terrified me. My sense of it came from The Warriors, Death Wish, Nighthawks, The French Connection, and Taxi Driver. And I watched Taxi Driver for the first time at the absurd age of 11. I first visited Chicago when I was 19, convinced I would be mugged, beaten, stripped, and paraded around the barrio as a specimen of the naive suburban South, then abandoned somewhere outside the city limits, never to return. That didn't happen, of course, but I couldn't quite believe the reality of what I saw walking around the actual streets of Chicago. This happened later when I visited New York City. It took years to shake the dystopian urban vision the movies had planted in my brain. I would guess that the New York City of fantasy and fiction is more real to most people than the actual city. In the South, an enormous stretch of real land populated with real people has the exact same problem. Let's skip ahead. I was inspired to write this book by Tom Anderson's unforgettable documentary, Los Angeles Plays Itself. It's a love letter to the movies, dusted with anthrax and laced with strychnine. I don't know Anderson, but I love him. This book is in large part a written response to his daring and astonishing movie, a film I can't get out of my head. But there's another director kind of influencing the book. Rüdiger Suchland, the German writer-director of the documentary Hitler's Hollywood, asked a question that became the animating force behind this book. What do movies know that we don't? That's a taste of the introduction.
That's great. So this was like not what I planned to ask questions about, but I need to hear more about Escape into the Cyber Castle of Death.
You want to know the plot?
Like when can we watch it? It sounds amazing.
These are lost. Well, I think Robert has them. He threatens to, digitize them. The plot is a guy breaking into a castle that looks like my friend Jeff's house, and he keeps killing guys that look like me.
So Robert, if you're watching, I think there's definitely an audience for this film. I'll send you my email. No, that's amazing. But you ended with a quote that I had noted down. I need to find it. But what is it? I'm going to get it wrong.
What do movies know that we don't?
Yeah, what do movies know that? There we go. What do movies know that we don't? Are you able to tell us that in a few sentences?
Maybe.
Okay.
I'll say in the film, Hitler's Hollywood, he shows little clips of all of these movies that came out after Hitler was in power. And they're terrifying. Even though the movies aren't scary, they didn't really have, they're not scary at all. But the imagery is telling one story and the plot is telling another. And he has one particular shot of a kind of Pied Piper character leading all of these villagers in this macabre dance. And it's when he says that, he asks that question, what do these movies know that we don't? Clearly, he's saying the movies, that they can sort of foretell the future by absorbing our fears and our worries and our anxieties and our desires and getting balled up and repackaged. So for me, the South is a real place, but it's an idea too that's been sold to us. And it's not a consistent idea. There's contradiction in it. There's different people have played with it a lot, hundreds, if not thousands. But if you take one film, maybe it has a lot of influence, maybe not. If you take 5 films, I don't know. But if you start talking about 500 films telling a similar story, giving us an America, a version or a vision of America, they start to have incredible power. Mm-hmm. So I don't have an answer to the question in America. In a way I do, but that's not really. But it's about kind of thinking about movies that way.
Well, so I was curious about growing up in the South. You know, you mentioned that you didn't necessarily have a particular affinity for films set in the South as a kid. So this is kind of a two-part question. Number one is maybe when did you first start really watching films that were set in the South? And secondly, with that, how did your like view of like where you're growing up, the people around you, were they impacted by these representations within the films?
I mean, it's a good question. So I grew up in Pensacola, Florida, which is nowhere. I mean, it's a military base. It's beachy. It's a little druggy. It's a little suburban. It's a little rural. It's sort of southern Alabama in parts, and also it's sort of Florida through and through. So I think everyone who lived there who didn't buy into the southern Alabama part probably felt the same as I did, which is like, we're not of the South. We just happen to live here. I might be wrong about that. But I started, it's funny. My wife got into graduate school in Iowa City, and she was busy all the time. So I started, and this is in the book, but I started watching movies from the library because I didn't have any money. So I would watch a movie every night because I didn't know anyone. I didn't have any money, and she was busy. So, and I started having kind of a yearning for films set in the South then, because I felt so disconnected to where I grew up. And that's when I watched Gone with the Wind all the way through for the first time, and was really struck by it, actually. And it was, I saw all the problems that everyone sees right away, but at the same time, it does have something magnetic and powerful in it. Now, as to what my friends, I would say everyone in the South has bought into one of the 4 or 5 major kind of representations of the South. The South as a especially aggrieved and abandoned place that's been betrayed by some federal overreach, or the South as more racist than the rest of the country. The South as mythical and golden and worthy of recreation. The South as dilapidated and terrible. I mean, I think that everyone I know kind of got a little bit of both of those, all of those.
Yeah. No, so I really noticed reading your book that those themes that you talk about, like the different. It was interesting to see those contradictions, particularly when you're talking about. I noticed in particular in the first chapter when you talk about early cinema, these early films that have some of the strongest impact on what came later, being Birth of a Nation and Gone with the Wind, and how those films and their representation of the South just seemed very different from the films that you talk about later, where I feel like the majority of the films that you mention are very like negative in how they view the South or people from the South, versus these earlier films that are very pro the creation, like the South and its myth.
Well, like the South, the early films, like Birth of a Nation I really didn't enjoy watching it, and it was distasteful. It was hard for me to watch it. A, I don't like silent cinema, and I know that's like actual cinephiles think I'm nuts, but I just don't enjoy it. But B, the movies, I mean, it's not just racist, it's like celebrating the KKK or the heroes. But it gave us some other things because it was the first blockbuster, not just technique. It also gave us black characters played by white people in blackface, right? It gave us a kind of certain type of stereotype that snuck into a lot of other early films. And it gave us a sense of excitement at the defeated Confederacy fighting back. Not just the KKK, but the South is going to stay something different from the rest of the country. And so Gone with the Wind, it's funny, David Selznick hired people to not to keep it from being racist. He hired consultants and said, I don't want to make a racist movie. I don't want to make Birth of a Nation. And yet it's got its own set of problems because of that. And it has a scene. I mean, the problem with Gone with the Wind, we all know it, is that Margaret Mitchell, her novel has it's a racist novel, right? I mean, it's well written, it's dramatic. I don't know if it's well written, but it's dramatic, it's exciting, but what are you going to do with some of the stuff in it? So, but like Hollywood, here's the thing, like Hollywood has always seen itself as a progressive place. It hasn't always been a progressive place, but it sees itself that way. And so, they don't want to make a film, a Kazan, Elias Kazan. He doesn't want to make a movie that is showing the South in a complicated way. That wasn't his thing. He's interested in characters and stuff. But so he made this it's a very good movie, Pinky. It's a really good film. It's got its problems, but no one watches it, but it's great, about a Black woman who lives in the North and comes back home, and where she lived in, Chicago or somewhere. And people didn't know she was Black because she's light skinned. And the minute she goes back home, everyone knows she's Black. And it's an interesting movie. And it's a condemnation. It's 1949. It's a condemnation of segregation and racism and I don't know how people took it when it came out, but I know that every filmmaker today, doesn't want to make like a racist statement. But when they do, it's amazing, right? Like Green Book. I mean, they're doing everything right. They're trying to show a story that's based on real people. They're trying to show more complicated Black characters. But the film still has these weird kind of things in it, and that's back to like the movie knows things that the people who made it don't know.
I was thinking about this, and you mentioned Birth of a Nation, and I had this question where, you say, just as America was built on two savage and cosmic crimes, the genocide of the American Indians and the enslavement and displacement of millions of Africans and their descendants, Hollywood was built on a movie that perpetuates the same racist violence. So, Oscar Wilde says that, life imitates art. And so I'm wondering, how does the great lie of this film still reverberate in Hollywood?
They still study it in film school, and there's a good story where Spike Lee I guess it was in the 80s. He's in film school. He's the only Black student, and they watched Birth of a Nation, and then the professor says, "What'd you guys think of it?" And everyone's like, "Oh, the cross-cutting, the drama." No one was talking about the political message, right? Which is really that the KKK, through their bravery, put down the Black rebellion. And that's the birth of a nation, the new white nation of America, which is like an astonishing thing. He was like, he couldn't believe it, that they could separate the form from the function, right? And so he eventually made Black Klansmen, and in it, he has a scene where the Klansmen are watching Birth of a Nation, and it keeps cutting back from the film to them laughing and drinking beer, and I think it's sort of his revenge on this class. But we're still living with it. I like those early films. They gave Gone with the Wind. It's such a powerful film. I know you said Birth of a Nation, but Gone with the Wind. It's like the former president was talking about it on the campaign trail in March. The COVID was killing people. He's in the race. He's going to lose. I mean, he knows he's behind. And he's talking about Gone with the Wind. HBO took it off their channel for 3 days, and people freak out about it. And so it's like these movies have a lot of power, both in themselves and then what they represent, right? And so, I mean, it's a complicated question in a way. I don't want to I'm not going to point to specific movies, but I will say that every movie made about the South contains both Gone with the Wind and Birth of a Nation, and then say Oscar Micheaux's movie. He's an early black filmmaker. He made a movie called Within Our Gates as a silent film as a response to Birth of a Nation. It's pretty good too. I mean, it's a silent film, so whatever. But they knew right away. People knew right away that this movie was a problem. But so I would say every film has all of those films in it because we're all part of it's all part of a tradition.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I answered your question. Sorry.
No, you did. I mean, and a lot of my questions sort of follow this same theme, which is this image of really the question of like, how do we see, sorry, Anya, I think you were going to ask something, but now I'm off. But how is it that we, I use that Oscar Wilde quote about life imitating art and like how much of this messaging, and you mentioned this in your sort of opening, that when we see, okay, maybe not one film, maybe not 5 films, but hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of films, how does that create a story, a narrative, even a reality that is arguably, I mean, that's I think what you do in your book is trying to unpack that.
Yeah, like in the 80s, I grew up in the 80s. We were talking about this before, and like there were, there might have been 50 films about America going back to Vietnam and like winning this time, and the suits aren't going to get in the way, and we're going to like kick butt, and we're not going to let and they were to a film, racist reimaginings, even the good ones. And I mean, I think one of the reasons why people still will say stupid stuff like, we didn't lose Vietnam, it's these movies.
Mm-hmm.
It's Rambo 2 and Missing in Action. And, and I mean, these are movies I loved as a kid, but I'm saying like they created a mythology, and this is only like 40 films or something. They created a mythology that we had to live with, and it had power in the world. I believe that. And so I think with Southern films and the contradictions, right, because they're not all on the same page at all, but we've got 100 years. We have 100 years of films dealing with the South. And the idea that it wouldn't impact the way we view ourselves is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say certain writers, screenwriters and directors in films had a lot more power than others and influence, but still taken as a whole, it's like a film, it's a history inside a larger history. And there's another book that I could have written, right? A straight history, because the regional censorship boards were very powerful. And Hollywood didn't want to like lose Memphis and Atlanta. They didn't want to lose the market. So they would sometimes a priori cut out like some of the black characters out of the movies, or like if there's any romantic look between characters of different races, they would just cut it out. And so, or they would be demanded to cut it out, and they would. And so like they were even back then, it was like 2 different realities, right? The movies were a little bit different when they were shown in the South. And that, to me, there's a great book to be written there. I'm not like a historian. I mean, you have to like dig through archives and stuff, but I was really struck by this.
Mm-hmm.
So this is kind of, I guess, I hope it's not like too long and rambling of a question, but there's just like a lot of different threads that I have. I'm going to try to pull it together.
You can do it.
Yeah. So I think like this idea of films, creating a narrative that we buy into, when it comes to the South, and the South these representations are contradictory, but what I did notice, and I think you mentioned a couple different times, is very often in these films, the South becomes where the rest of the nation can lay the blame for the sins of racism and slavery, and that the South becomes a villain, so the rest of the states can feel better about ourselves. And I was curious because this seems like at a time when where there's a lot of fragmentation and polarization and disagreement, that this sort of narrative probably isn't necessarily bringing us closer to, I guess, finding unity as a nation in any way. If there's consistent blame put on one group, one area of the nation. And here's the roundabout question, I guess. You talk about at the very end of the book, the movie Queen and Slim, and the way that it represents the South as no more evil or good than the rest of the country. And so I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on maybe films that have come out, since this movie's been released that you didn't get to talk about? Do you think that there is a change in the way that the South is overall being represented, or that there needs to be a change, especially with this like racial reckoning that is happening that represents, there's sort of an awareness now that, it's the South is not for white people. Everyone else is aware of it, but white people being like, maybe we were also racist this whole time.
Right. So I stopped the principal writing of this in 2016. And then I kept adding, new movies that come out, and I would keep going. And then I wrote the epilogue right at the end of 2019, like November. Queen and Slim's a great film, right? At the endings, it almost ruins it at the last 45 seconds, but up to that, it's a great film. It's a great road movie. It's very romantic. It's filmed beautifully, great writing. And in it, these two black characters get pulled over by a cop. I want to say they were in Ohio, but I don't remember. Maybe Pittsburgh. They get pulled over by a cop, played by a musician, actually the guy, I'll think of his name in a minute. And he's going to shoot them. Like, it gets out of hand, he's going to shoot them. They haven't done anything wrong. They're on a first date. And so they wrestle, and the guy shoots the cop. And then they have to flee. And they become kind of folk heroes. And when they go to the South, two things happen. One, people help them every step of the way, which is really interesting for a lot of reasons. Two, there's a scene that they don't really comment on it too much, but he's like, it feels so good. The heat and the landscapes, it feels like I'm coming home, something like that. And she looks out the window and sees kind of prisoners doing field work, and they're all black. And she says something like, well, I'm not so sure things have changed. I'm not quoting it right, but that kind of, to me, was a kind of pulling it together. I'm really glad I saw that movie near the end of because I don't know, I might have had to change things. But so things have definitely changed, right? And I think it's because of all the videos of police murdering black citizens everywhere, right? And I think we've had an enormous jump in, and not just white people, but just how our understanding of ourselves as a country with all the problems we have. And I think only a fool would say the South is racist, the rest of the country is enlightened. I think everyone would have said that in 1975. I think everyone would have said that. No, I mean, obviously, black citizens in California might have been like, it sucks here too, but they would have said it's better here, right? But I think that's changed. And so, and I think it's a good thing. But it used to be, humorously, the villain or the idiot, Southern accent. No, you don't have to do a character development. Just slap a Southern accent on that guy. You're going to know this guy's a racist, he's uneducated, and he's violent, right? And a lot of films have played into that, including a film I love, Deliverance, right? It's a great film. It's, I think, misunderstood because it has this famous assault in it. It's a great movie. It's complete fiction. And in the movie, I'm sure everyone, if you haven't seen it, 4 guys go canoeing, and they run across some inbred rednecks who rape one of them and try to kill him. And they do it because that's who they are. And it's an astonishing that people bought it. I mean, it's a good film, but the people bought that whole idea because there's no more violence. I mean, in the hinterlands, I live in Chicago, right? And there's no more violence in the back roads of for anybody in the back roads of Georgia than there is here. And so, it's a complex problem. Now, unity is interesting because I really believe that movies and music are a way that Americans could be like, we have stuff in common, right? We all like Aretha Franklin. We all like, Otis Redding. Like we all, or, and there's certain films that I don't know. I think there is some way out of our gridlock, maybe through our culture, but I don't know. I don't think I answered your question either, but
I mean, it's a hard question to answer, but that was a good, I think that you got there.
Well, you highlighted something that we, Anne and I, because we planned some questions and got together and met ahead of time. And so we thought about areas we wanted to talk about. And one of the things that we had was talking about the economic disparities and how much they matter. And you show this over and over again. You talk about poor white people and how they're treated in film. If they're from the Midwest, they're seen in a certain light. But if they're from the South, they're represented entirely differently. Can you go into more detail about that?
Yeah, there's a famous, I'll do two. John Ford directed 2 films. One won a bunch of awards and was based on a John Steinbeck novel. And it follows some Oklahoma people who are displaced. And they travel to California and they're besieged by hardship. They don't have any money. And The Grapes of Wrath, right? It's a very famous book, a good film, famous film. And every step of the way, their deprivation, there's humor in the movie, and in the book, but in the movie, there's humor, right? But they have integrity, right? They are striving. They're trying to make it. Another film that John Ford directed was Tobacco Road, which was by an Erskine Caldwell novel. If you've never read Erskine Caldwell, he's not a good writer, but he was a huge success back in the day. And he made 2 big novels, Tobacco Road and Godzilla Laker, both made into movies. So in Tobacco Road, the country people, same people, but they're from Georgia, not Oklahoma. They are savage. They are stupid. They are incredibly violent. They're rapey. It's not that I don't know. They're vicious, and they have. The film is mocking them every step of the way, and they're in the same situation as the Okies. They lost their land. They have no money. They have no resources. They're screwed, right? And I was really struck by these 2 films that it's okay to kick the crap narratively out of the Tobacco Roaders and to make them look dumb the whole time, but the Oklahoma people. Same people, right? But the Oklahoma people, they are seen as noble. And so part of that's the novelists, right? Steinbeck and Caldwell, but also I just think that it's just the South the South deserves some of it, but the South has been the punching bag for a long time. And poor white people, these are people who've been poor for 100 years. These are people who've been destitute. They've been so dire in some of these communities for a long time. And it struck me as sour and false. And Tobacco Road was a huge movie. It was like a big film. And there's a lot of films like that. Again, Deliverance. There's a whole a channel of movies, right, that do that. And it's fine. It's fine. Movies can make fun of who they want, but it seems cheap and mean-spirited and cruel to kick people who are so poor they can't afford to see your movie. And so that was something I was struck by. And I'm not defending it ever, and I'm not defending any of the South's sins. We have a lot that we have to atone for. We have I'm not defending the South, but I just felt that this was crazy.
And you have this quote in here where you're talking about specifically biopics of Black civil rights leaders or Black musicians, but particularly Black people from the South in 50s, the 60s, fighting often the sort of civil rights battle, even if, the stories about them as a musician or whatnot, where you talk about often how these films can be good, but they're not necessarily great because their villain, this force they're fighting against, is just so indefensible, like with the racism, the segregation, the Jim Crow stuff, that they as the protagonists aren't really able to become fully fledged human characters, because how do you have a complicated, fully fledged hero with just with a villain that can't be nuanced in any way, shape, or form? I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Like there haven't been enough films. It's an extra layer of hate crime. When you think about the Black dancers and musicians who have not had films made about them, it starts to pile up, and you're like, what's going on, right? And it's changed. Recently, you're seeing a lot of new stuff. Still, I've maintained there haven't been A-list treatments of a lot of the Wilson Pickett, Otis Redding. Like this Aretha Franklin movie just came out. I haven't seen it. I mean, it's coming out, or I haven't seen it yet. But the civil rights people too. And I will say Selma, which is visually well filmed. The acting is good. But it's, to me, I mean, is boring. And it's because Martin Luther King is one of the only saints we have, right? Lincoln maybe being the other one, and maybe no, the founder's not anymore. So like you have Lincoln and Martin Luther King, right? You have two. I would say we have two saints, a couple others that are close. Fannie Lou Hamer maybe, but saints are boring because you can't. They're saints for a reason. You can't. Martin Luther King's a very complicated guy. So Selma, I felt like Martin Luther King's a very funny guy. Like if you actually, he's funny. He's a great public speaker, and obviously the best day we've ever had. And he had assassination attempts. He had affairs. He had, he was imprisoned over and over. He had like all this dramatic stuff happen. And every fictional film about him is just like, it's just not exciting to me. And I think it's because what you're saying, right? He was fighting against a system, right? And a system is not like, it's hard to make a system an interesting villain. Mm-hmm. And the civil rights movement has inherent drama. There just haven't been many good films. I challenge anybody. I mean, there's a couple made for TV movies. There's a handful, and they're coming newer, but there haven't been many good films about it. There haven't been any good films about the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. There haven't been any good films about the Freedom Riders. And these are like, there should be. So your question haunts me a little bit. I mean, the easy answer is Hollywood's racist and they just can't do a good film about a Black hero. I don't think that that's the thing, though. I think that no one quite knows how to tell that story in a way. It's almost obscene to make it exciting. Let's put it that way. Yeah. Like it's almost obscene to be like, no, this Martin Luther King movie, we got to add some like spice. And I think that's, again, he's a saint, and he's my hero too. He's amazing, and I've read 4 or 5 books on the guy, and I can't. I think he should be a separate. He should be like he shouldn't be the main character as part of the thing. But yeah, there have been very few good civil rights films. Mississippi Burning is the one that people like point to. A-list cast, big budget, great director, but the FBI guys who were at best complacent semi-villains are the heroes of the movie.
I think that is something that you touch on in other parts of the book. This idea of like these white characters as often, I guess, white characters who are sort of the heroes of the film, or at the very least, sort of the antagonists who become the heroes. So, like, one of the examples being like In the Heat of the Night, or Driving Miss Daisy, or Green Book. But that's almost sort of a way of trying to have an antagonistic as well as like nuanced representation of like racism in the fight, but it's still ultimately sides with the white, like not sides, but focuses on the white characters because they can be human.
So James Baldwin, who was a first-rate film critic, he has a great essay on all this stuff that I use a little bit. I mean, I say that I'm using it, but he basically says, in the heat of the night, right? It's concerned with Rod Steiger's salvation, and it's willing to sacrifice Sidney Poitier's body to get him there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Sidney Poitier's body and everything about him doesn't matter, right? If like it matters, but he's there to show that Rod Steiger can change.
Mm-hmm.
And the result is, and by the way, I think Sidney Poitier is a great actor. I like that movie a lot. And it was actually funny. It was filmed in Illinois because Poitier didn't want to film in the segregated South. So in the heat of the night, you can see their breath. It's like freezing cold when they film. But, Rod Steiger gets the better role, right? Because he gets to be conflicted. He gets to be a jerk. He gets to grow. And he gets to kind of have to like chew on his own shortcomings, which is what actors want, like a rich, meaty role. Of course, Poitier looks great in a suit and runs around, and he's the action guy. But the up until recently, the black characters, even the good ones, are there to like give the white characters something to like learn from. That changed, though. It really has changed. And Moonlight, which was just dynamite, just a dynamite film. It's Miami. It's a gay Miami. It's black Miami, but everything's handled with such elegance. It's hard. I mean, it's a tough movie, but with such like a kind of rigorous elegance. It's a wonderful film, and I think one of the reasons people loved it is that it was like, oh, here's like a Southern story we haven't seen before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I just want to let people watching know that now is a great time. If you have any questions, please type them in the chat, and we will make sure that we share them with Ben. And we actually already have two. So we have this question here from one of our absolute favorite, longtime committed viewers, Miss Vivian. It's a pleasure to see you, Miss Vivian, again. And she is hoping you can tell us, what does the title mean?
So it's supposed to be, it's a play off of a documentary called Los Angeles Plays Itself. And in that movie, the filmmaker says Los Angeles is the most filmed city in the history of the world. It's the most documented city in the history of the world because Hollywood films everything there. But it's rarely playing itself. It's it's often a stand-in for some other place or for nowhere. So I was playing on this idea that the South is never fully captured in the movies, right? So even though, and this is a fun way to watch a movie. If next time you're watching a film, like try to look behind the characters and see like what's going on behind the characters. Does it landscape? Is it someplace you've seen before or that you identify with? But to me, the South that I grew up in was just never fully captured on screen because you can't capture a contradiction or like the South's not one thing, right? So the title was supposed to be kind of catchy too. I mean, but that's sort of what it means. It's that, they're trying, filmmakers try, here's another way to put it. A filmmaker can set a movie in Nowheresville in Indiana or Ohio. And that film is not going to be about Indiana or Ohio. That film's going to be about America or about the characters. You're never going to set a film in Alabama unless you want to talk about Alabama. You're never going to set a film in Texas unless you want to talk about Texas and about the South. And so I am fascinated and was interested in this, but it was supposed to be kind of catchy too.
What I really like about one of the things I really enjoyed about your book was when you dived into different states and films set in those states, and I thought that was like one of those a really strong example of just kind of what you talked about the South in general is a place, but then the states themselves take on their own lives because states are just so different. I know I've seen things from people in like Europe or other countries where like people talk about when you go to America, like each state is like a different country. And I think that you see that in your book.
Well, like Florida for me is like the past and the future, like mashed together. Right. And I like Florida and Texas are the most complex southern states, maybe Virginia, but I actually don't get into Virginia much because Virginia is, military and beltway, but Florida and Texas are these massive states filled with different people and have crazy histories. And, the films reflect that. and I was kind of shocked, really, at how many great films, were set in Florida. I hadn't really thought it through before I started.
Mm-hmm. All right, we have another question from our favorite viewer coming to us from Hawaii. So, hi, Hawaii. Is there any one film that stands out in your mind as an anecdote to a historically racist movie industry?
Yeah, sure. I was going to write it, Birth of a Nation to Birth of a Nation. Nate Parker made a film about a failed slave rebellion, Nat Turner. Mm-hmm. So I was going to do Birth of a Nation, Birth of a Nation. I thought it was going to be very clever. But Nate Parker's film didn't satisfy. It didn't work in the way that I was hoping. But a movie did, called The Free State of Jones, which is a true, based on a true story about a group of people during the Civil War, white and black, in Alabama, who refused to fight in the war, and they formed their own state. And the film was misinterpreted because people thought it was like another white savior movie, but it's not. Jones isn't a guy; it's this town, and they form their own country, and they have like these kind of Marxist ideals, right? And slavery's outlawed, and they make a go of it. And the reason the film is so hard to watch, it's well made, it's great acting, it's very grim, because the last 30 minutes of the film shows Reconstruction failing. And all the characters that you've been cheering for and all the work they've done gets erased by the kind of racist superstructure getting put back and fighting its way back into power. And it is an incredible film that says basically the war didn't resolve anything. Mm. And 12 Years a Slave is another really good one that what's fascinating about 12 Years a Slave, if you haven't seen it, great film, hard to get excited for it on a Friday night because it's tough, but I mean, it's a great film. It takes a true guy, a real life guy, gets kidnapped out of New York City and by slavers, and he is forced into slavery down, I want to say in Louisiana, for 12 years. And the film, because he's never been a slave, the horrors of slavery, which are, I mean, they're not any better for someone who's born into it, but because he's experiencing everything as an outsider, you're experiencing it with him. And it's so beautifully filmed, and it's very powerful. And to me, should be required viewing. Anyone who says slavery wasn't that bad should watch 12 Years a Slave. And if you still think it's bad, watch it again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Well, I just want to circle us back to a conversation we're having backstage, where so our two film buffs were connecting on something, and the one non-film buff, which was me, was not really clear what you're talking about. So I'm hoping you can talk to me and all the viewers now, which is this idea of U.S. cinema and what is U.S. cinema versus world cinema, and the influences that we see or maybe don't recognize in U.S. cinema.
Sure. I'll take a stab at it, unless Anya may want to answer. But so here's one that's kind of interesting. German immigrants fled Nazi Germany. A lot of them were Jewish, not all of them. And they started making films here, and they brought with them other film people, right? Set designers and stuff. So those guys made a lot of B films in America. And a lot of them made film noir. And because they were outsiders, they saw Los Angeles and America differently than we do. And that's part of why that sour note, Mm-hmm. So the French film critics in the 50s glommed onto they loved these B movies made by German immigrants, right, in working in America, Hollywood films, American films, and they championed them. And then they made their own versions of those films. And then U.S. film students in the 70s said, oh man, I love what these French guys are doing, right, in the French New Wave. So they started making the, kind of American Renaissance in the 70s. They started making films inspired by the French New Wave, inspired by these, B movies made by German and other Czechoslovakian immigrants. And then the whole world says, hey man, America's got it going on again. And then they start making films based on that. And so you have this, and I love this stuff. I mean, I'm like a moving, I'm not an academic, but I love this stuff. I could read about this stuff all day. So that's like an example of like,
So I think either I froze or we maybe lost Ben. Anya, are you here,
he's
Anya?
frozen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so I will say this while we're just on a pause, that if anybody has any questions, type them in, because we're hopefully going to get him back here in just a minute. And if you're interested in reading more about the book, make sure that you take it out from your local library. Our friends pgcmls.info can also hook you up with a virtual library card if you don't have one. And the best way that you can support artists and guests like Ben, who spent their time with us, is to buy their books. And I'm going to repeat all of this in a minute when we go to close it. Hopefully we'll get Ben back. Oh, yeah. Did I freeze?
No, you're here.
Okay.
Oh, he's gone.
Oh, he's gone. Okay. All right.
Uh-oh.
Okay. So we lost. Can someone? I've got a test from Robert Evans. Can somebody out there in the world who's watching us let us know if Anya and I are still communicating out there to all of you? Somebody give me a sign.
Yeah.
We're gonna hope that we get.
Oh, we got to.
Oh, okay. It sounds like Robert, you have a question. Go ahead and type it in. We're hoping we're going to get Ben back here. And we'll give him a few minutes to try and come back. If you'd like to put your question in, we will hit him with it when he returns. This is the thing about technology, live theater, everybody. So, and let me ask you a question while we're waiting. That looks like maybe Robert will put one in the chat here when we get Ben back. But oh, it's one of Ben's old teachers is here. Okay. Well, hopefully we'll get Ben back for you, Mr. Evans, and that would be awesome. And let me ask a question to you. Out of the movies that you saw, and I was going to ask this question to Ben, but I know we're also sort of running out of time. So let me ask you this question. We're in the middle of a global pandemic. Give me right now, off the top of your head, top 3 movies to get you through the pandemic, and go.
Oh, no, that's so difficult. Okay. I definitely think I'm a big Star Wars fan, as you can probably tell if you can see my Funko Pops up there. I love Star Wars. I think that there's something to be said for any sort of. I was going to mention this when he was here and talking about global cinema, because I really enjoy that topic. But popular cinema is great, and don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Even if it is like made for consumers and tested to death or whatever, it's meant for you to enjoy it. It's just for you to eat popcorn and have fun. So I think to get through a pandemic, watch, the original Star Wars movies. 100%.
Hey,
you're back.
Sorry, I don't know what happened.
No, we were just filling dead air, but we are so excited because we have one of your old teachers here, Robert Evans, who would like the record to show that you are being too modest about your abilities as an actor. You were a brilliant student, but you also played a starring role in a production of Othello.
He had me read as a Rodrigo, who's kind of the bumpkin idiot. I gave it my best. Dr. Evans, hey.
He's singing your praises over here. Yeah. So it was amazing. So thank you so much, Mr. Evans, for tuning in. Dr. Evans, Mr. Evans, thank you. Ben, when you were gone, I hit Anya with an unexpected question. And so I'm gonna now hit you with it. Get ready. Fast as you can. We're in the middle of a global pandemic. Top 3 movies for getting through a global pandemic, and go.
Ooh, I would say North by Northwest, something fun and elegant and sophisticated with lots of travel. I would say, that's a tough one. Maybe Moonlight, because it's got an optimistic view of people, and it's fascinating the way it's filmed, and it's really exciting. I don't know. Oh, and what's the one? I'm thinking of it. Well, Night of the Hunter.
So I haven't heard of that. What is that?
Robert Mitchum plays a psychotic pastor who's like has love and hate tattooed on his hands, and he's pursuing these 2 kids through the countryside, trying to get them to tell him where the this money is buried. It's great.
And that one is on Canopy. So
all right.
Our viewers can watch
or
it.
Singing in the Rain. And Dr. Evans, you rule. I miss you. You're you know how important you are to me.
Awesome. I love it. I love that Dr. Evans is here with us and chatting. It's just fantastic. Anya, did you have another question that you'd like to ask? I'm going to put up some information about Canopy. So for those of you who are watching, please do visit our friends at the library. If you don't already have a library card, you can get one. You can even get one, even if you don't live here, Dr. Evans, you can get one from Prince George's County Memorial Library System, pgcmls.info. They will give you a virtual library card, and then you can watch all these movies and more on Canopy. And I'm sure that's true for anyone's local library as well.
My Cousin Vinny. That was the movie I was
Oh,
thinking.
My Cousin Vinny.
Yes, that was so good.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Is My Cousin Vinny or is My Cousin Vinny not the greatest movie of all time?
It's up there, even though, I love it. Anyway.
I went to so I'm actually originally from Canada, but I did my I live in Maryland now, and I did my master's degree at Mississippi University for Women, and one of the reasons I chose to go there was because I didn't know anything about the South. I had basically seen Mississippi burning and had that imprinted on me, and I was apprehensive, and so I wanted to face that apprehension by going to Mississippi, and anyway, that's how I ended up going to school there. But before I went, the first time I went down there, I sat my whole family down and made them watch My Cousin Vinny as our preparation to going. So,
yeah. I'm sure they were like, "Are you really going to move there?"
Yeah. It was virtual. It was mostly long distance, but I did go there a few times, and it was wonderful. Sorry, Anya, you were going to say?
No, so I think you Ben asked me this backstage, and so I want to return the favor of who was your, I guess, top director.
That's a good one. I really like, in the classic era, I like Anthony Mann and Alfred Hitchcock. They're good stuff. Nowadays, I like Barry Jenkins a lot. I like I could answer that question forever. But I like a clean style, right? Like I like an elegant, clean style with tension in it. And so I prefer the classic era.
Yeah.
All right. Anya, we're almost out of time. Do you have a last question to close with, buddy?
Oh, there's so much to talk about with this book. And there's so much stuff that we can get into in terms of just, race and class and location. And it's a real, just for everyone watching, I highly recommend it. It's just a brilliant, way of, it's like, you're almost like traveling through the South and through time, with this book. And I definitely recommend it. I don't know. There's so much to ask about. I know we have so little time.
Yeah, we do. We really do have little time. So maybe I'll just interrupt and just close it out. But I will say this. First of all, Ben, it was so fantastic to talk to you. I love that you took time to be with us tonight. So thank you so much. And thank your family who were very gracious and made space for us all to chat together. So thank you to kids and wife and for your whole family for being part of this. Anya, it was an absolute pleasure to have you co-host this, so thank you very much. Dr. Evans, thank you so much for coming and telling us the truth about Ben. That was fantastic. And of course, all of our viewers, thank you for being here with us. We hope that you enjoyed the conversation. And as I said earlier, really the best way that you can support writers is by buying the books. And so you can get The South Never Plays Itself at your favorite independent bookstore. We welcome you to do that. There is Mahogany Books in Prince George's County and Loyalty Books in Washington, D.C. and Silver Spring if you're looking for a bookstore to order from that is local to us. And of course, you can also take it out from your library. I do want to thank the library system for the partnership with this event and also for NewSouth Books. It's been a great partnership series with them, and we're thrilled and happy to be able to do it. I do want to let you know about a couple events we have coming up. On December 1st, I'm super excited that we're going to be talking to the new Iowa Prize winner about Heir to the Crescent Moon. And that is going to be co-hosted with 2019 Iowa Prize winner Kendra Allen. And that should be a wonderful event, December 1st. And then November 17th, going back in time, our disability series with Finley and Chris continues, and it's Finley and Chris Talk Truth, and they are going to welcome special guest L. Lamar Wilson and look at disability in art, poetry, academia. Should be really great. So please join us for that next week. And again, thank you, Ben, so much for being here. Thank you, Anya, and for all
thank
of
you
watching.
both. Yeah, thank you. Thanks everybody. Thank you. This is I'm very grateful.
right. Good night, everybody.